When the body goes silent, the soul speaks. The truth behind abstinence. In the silence of the body, the soul begins to sing. This ancient truth, echoed by mystics and psychologists alike, reminds us that what appears to be emptiness is often the birthplace of deep transformation. As Carl Jung taught, when we withdraw from external distractions, the unconscious finds its voice. In today's video, we'll explore the profound spiritual awakening that often follows periods of abstinence, not as deprivation, but as a sacred return to the self. Have you ever experienced a moment when silence revealed something powerful within you? Let us know in the comments below. And if this message speaks to your journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, your space for inner growth and soulful insight. 1. The silence of the body is a spiritual awakening, not a loss. What appears to be absence, abstinence, or emotional withdrawal is often misjudged in a world obsessed with stimulation. But when a woman chooses to step away from physical desire and external validation, she isn't diminishing herself. She's returning home. She's not disappearing into emptiness, but expanding into a deeper presence. The silence of the body is not the end of intimacy. It is the beginning of self-intimacy, where the soul is finally allowed to speak after years of being drowned out by noise. Carl Jung believed that all repressed energy must find new expression. So when the body is no longer fixated on instant pleasure or emotional approval, the soul seizes that moment to rise. This isn't suppression, it's transmutation. And in that shift, something sacred occurs. Energy that once ran outward now flows inward, illuminating forgotten corridors of the psyche. Women in this space often report heightened dreams, sharper intuition, and spontaneous spiritual awakening. These are not anomalies. They are echoes of the truth that the soul has been waiting to be heard. Abstinence, then, becomes a spiritual threshold, not a denial, but a rebirth. It is in the absence of touch that one discovers the untouched parts of the self, the sacred terrain that was never meant for anyone else to reach. In this silence, the feminine spirit reclaims its wholeness. It begins to explore depths that were previously buried beneath layers of longing and distraction. Spiritual wisdom teaches us that this inner quiet is not passive. It is profoundly creative. It is where the soul regenerates, remembers, and reveals. As the outer world fades into the background, the inner voice gains clarity. What once seemed like loneliness transforms into sacred solitude. What once felt like emptiness reveals itself as spaciousness. And within that space, something ancient awakens. This is not merely psychological. It is energetic, cellular, ancestral. It is the unraveling of generational scripts that taught women to measure their worth by affection received rather than presence embodied. When the body goes silent, the soul becomes the author. It writes not in words, but in sensations, visions, and deep knowledge. This is the terrain of individuation, where the false self begins to dissolve, and the authentic self, rooted in divine essence, emerges. In this space, a woman does not seek to be chosen. She realizes she was never meant to compete, only to remember who she is when everything external falls away. The journey inward is not easy. It requires courage to face the void without trying to fill it. But spiritual wisdom shows us that this silence is not a punishment. It is a portal. It is the place where the feminine rises not as an object of desire, but as a sovereign soul embodying her full light. And that light, once revealed, is not dependent on touch or approval. It is sustained by truth. Have you ever embraced silence and felt your soul begin to speak? If so, share your experience in the comments below to inspire others on their journey. If not, comment. I will listen within to begin this sacred path of spiritual awakening together. 2. Celibacy and withdrawal are portals, not punishments. Periods of celibacy are not a punishment. They are portals of deep transformation. In those quiet seasons where the body withdraws from external touch and the noise of desire, something ancient stirs within. Abstinence is not about denial, but about transmutation. It is the sacred act of turning your energy inward, allowing it to feed your soul rather than seeking fulfillment from temporary sources. This internal redirection creates a shift, one that frees you from roles imposed by society and births a version of you that is no longer defined by external validation. Carl Jung taught that repressed energy never disappears, it transforms. When desire is not acted upon, it doesn't fade, it rises. It becomes vision, insight, and spiritual depth. In the silence of the body, the unconscious finds space to surface. The soul begins to speak. Your intuition sharpens. Dreams become vivid. A subtle electricity moves through your being. You begin to sense a presence within yourself that was always there, waiting to be remembered. This is the beginning of individuation, not fitting in, but becoming whole. Society often fears a woman who no longer seeks validation because she is no longer controllable. She becomes unpredictable, sovereign, self-sourced. Her energy, once poured into others, now nourishes her creativity, her insight, her power. She stops being a mirror for someone else's desires and begins to reflect the divine within herself. When you choose abstinence, consciously or not, you reclaim your energetic field. You begin to glow, not because someone desires you, but because you've turned your gaze inward and lit a fire from within. Maya, a modern woman, experienced this firsthand. After a breakup, she chose solitude. No dating, no distractions. What emerged from that stillness was not emptiness, but abundance. She began to write, to heal, to listen. Her soul became louder than the noise of the world. She wasn't retreating, she was returning. And when she finally re-emerged, she was not the same woman. She was whole. This is the spiritual wisdom behind abstinence. It is not about giving something up, but about gaining yourself back. It is a rite of passage, an alchemical process where the raw material of desire is refined into presence, awareness, and inner power. The silence of the body is not a void. It is a sacred space where the soul begins to speak, not in words, but in knowing. You don't lose yourself in withdrawal. You find the parts of you that were buried beneath the noise. If this message resonates with you, take a moment to share it with someone who's also learning to reclaim their energy and power. Let's break the myth that celibacy is punishment and show the world that silence, stillness, and sovereignty are sacred. Together, we're rewriting the story. 3. This inner journey marks the beginning of individuation. When a woman stops seeking to be chosen and finally chooses herself, she initiates one of the most profound transformations in her life. According to Carl Jung, this marks the beginning of individuation, a deep inner journey toward wholeness where she confronts and integrates the shadow, the unmet needs, and the unconscious patterns that have silently shaped her. This is not just a psychological shift, it is the essence of a spiritual awakening. The moment she turns inward, something powerful begins to stir. Her silence is not a sign of absence, but of presence. It's the sacred space where the soul, long ignored, finally begins to speak. Choosing oneself means no longer measuring worth by someone else's recognition. It means stepping away from the exhausting chase for validation and instead learning to witness one's own light. This is where spiritual wisdom begins to grow. In the stillness, stripped of distractions, the truth surfaces. The energy once poured into being wanted now returns inward, nourishing forgotten dreams, healing emotional wounds, and awakening buried intuition. As Jung said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." The awakening is not sudden. It's slow and quiet, unfolding like dawn after a long night. In this sacred silence, many women report changes that seem mystical. Their dreams become more symbolic, their instincts sharper, their presence more magnetic. These are not coincidences. They are echoes of the soul reclaiming its voice. Abstinence, whether emotional, physical, or energetic, creates a container for deeper truths to rise. It is in this inner retreat that the fragmented parts of the self begin to return home. The body no longer runs toward quick pleasures. It listens. The mind no longer chases noise. It rests. And in this return, the woman discovers something radical. She was never incomplete to begin with. Individuation is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. It is the sacred rebellion of no longer settling for crumbs of attention. It is the spiritual maturity to sit in solitude, not with fear, but with reverence. The woman who walks this path does not become harder. She becomes more open, but discerning, more loving, but boundaries. Her energy becomes medicine, not because she performs for it, but because she embodies it. She becomes a mirror to others, reflecting back what they have forgotten in themselves. When the body goes silent, the soul is finally heard. And in that silence, a woman finds not emptiness, but expansion. Not lack, but presence. Not loneliness, but truth. This is spiritual awakening in its rawest form, not loud or dramatic, but quiet, honest, and irreversible. Are you ready to choose yourself and begin the journey toward wholeness? If so, comment below. I choose myself, to affirm your commitment to this path of individuation and spiritual wisdom. Let's walk this journey together. 4. The pain of disconnection is a necessary rite of passage. Pulling away from relationships and societal expectations can feel like being exiled from everything familiar. There's an ache, almost unbearable at times, that surfaces when a woman chooses to disconnect from the noise of the world. She may feel invisible in a room full of people, misunderstood by those she once trusted, even judged for walking a path that others cannot see. But this pain is not a mistake. It's a sacred invitation. This is not isolation. This is immersion. She is not breaking down. She is being drawn inward. What feels like emotional death is actually the first breath of spiritual awakening, a silent rite of passage that only the brave accept. In the quiet, where distractions fade and the external world loses its grip, something ancient begins to stir. It's the soul whispering beneath years of conditioning and roles she was told to play. Carl Jung taught that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and that becoming often begins in the dark. The discomfort she feels is not a void, but a passage narrow, sacred, and necessary. She is not vanishing, she is shedding. The woman who felt small is dissolving, so the woman who is whole can rise. The absence of affection, of being needed, of being desired, it all begins to carve out space. Not emptiness, but expansion. In that space, she meets herself in ways she never could when her body was tethered to fleeting touch or superficial validation. Her inner voice grows louder. Her dreams become messengers. Her instincts sharpen. Emotional clarity begins to replace emotional chaos. What once looked like a season of suffering reveals itself as spiritual wisdom in disguise. This is not just about abstaining from physical intimacy. It's about abstaining from self-abandonment. It's about choosing the raw, unfiltered presence of your own soul over the comfort of shallow connection. And it is in this brave silence that she begins to transmute pain into power, confusion into clarity, and absence into sacred presence. The old version of her, built on performance and approval, fades away. What rises is a woman rooted in inner truth, unshaken, whole, and fully alive. If you're walking through the pain of disconnection, know that you're not alone. It's a sacred passage, not a punishment. Subscribe to our channel and join a community that honors your transformation. Here, we explore the depths of spiritual rebirth and remind each other that solitude can be a gateway to profound presence. You are not forsaken, you are becoming. 5. She learns to love from wholeness, not from need. She no longer bends to be loved, nor does she twist herself into shapes that make others comfortable. In the quiet space she's created away from the noise of constant validation seeking, she begins to feel something deeper, the power of her own presence. Her transformation didn't come from another person's approval, but from the sacred stillness of being alone. As Carl Jung wisely said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." And now, in turning inward, she awakens to a truth she had forgotten she is already whole. No longer ruled by the fear of abandonment or the need to prove her worth, she stops searching for love to fill a gap. She's done performing. She's done waiting for a text, a nod, or a half-hearted commitment. Instead, she pours that energy back into herself. Through long walks without a destination, through journaling that reveals buried emotions, through meditations that bring her home to her breath, she rediscovers herself. The silence of abstinence isn't emptiness, it's spaciousness. And in that space, the soul begins to speak. When she finally opens her heart again, it will not be an act of desperation. It will not be a cry for rescue. It will be a grounded offering from someone who has made peace with her own shadows. Love will no longer be a transaction, a compromise of her essence. It will be a dance between two whole beings, not halves seeking completion, but full energies drawn together by resonance, not need. She has learned that the right love doesn't ask her to shrink. It invites her to expand. There's no more proving, no more shrinking, no more settling for affection that feels like a negotiation. Her new form of love is not loud or desperate. It is calm, radiant, and magnetic. It flows from abundance, not lack. It comes not to save her, but to meet her. Carl Jung's work reminds us that healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who we truly are before the world taught us to be afraid. This is the spiritual wisdom born from choosing stillness over chaos, presence over performance, wholeness over need. The woman who once searched outside now listens within. She no longer asks, "Will they love me?" Instead, she declares, "I love me." And that truth reshapes everything. Do you resonate with this kind of love, one that flows from wholeness, not desperation? If so, declare it boldly in the comments. I love from abundance, not need. Let's inspire each other to choose empowered, conscious love. 6. She becomes a beacon of feminine power. She no longer waits to be chosen. She radiates from within. The awakened woman moves differently, not because she's louder, but because her silence carries truth. She doesn't seek validation in the eyes of others. Instead, her presence speaks volumes. There's a quiet confidence in her that makes people pause. What once felt like loneliness now feels like liberation. What once seemed like a void is now sacred space. She has become the embodiment of feminine power, one that does not ask, but simply is. Her silence is not absence, it is pure presence. It's not weakness, it's energetic strength. In a world that constantly demands women to perform, please, and prove, she dares to stop performing. And when the body stops performing, the soul finally steps in. As Carl Jung wisely said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And that becoming often begins when you no longer distract yourself from your own truth. The silence she embraces is not punishment. It is initiation. This is not just about abstinence in the physical sense. It's an energetic withdrawal from anything that disconnects her from her essence. The noise of romantic pursuit, the need for attention, the craving for approval, she releases them all. And in doing so, she begins to hear something else, her own voice. Her intuition sharpens, her dreams grow vivid, her inner world becomes alive. Without the distraction of external touch, she begins to touch parts of herself that had never been felt before. She remembers, she reconnects, she rises. In this inward journey, she becomes more than a woman. She becomes a mirror, a living reflection for those still trapped in cycles of pleasing and performing. She doesn't preach. She doesn't convince. Her life becomes the sermon. Her walk becomes the message. She inspires without trying, teaches without speaking, leads by simply existing in alignment. She doesn't beg to be seen. Her light is undeniable. Her energy speaks first. This is spiritual awakening in motion. It's not always loud, and it doesn't always look like enlightenment. Sometimes it looks like solitude, like saying no, like disappearing for a while. But beneath it all, a profound transformation is taking place. She is no longer performing life. She is living it. And so, she becomes the quiet revolutionary. Not because she raises her fist, but because she no longer lowers her energy to be accepted. Her silence becomes her protest. Her softness becomes her shield. Her boundaries become her altar. She walks in self-possession, not because she has something to prove, but because she has nothing left to chase. She is whole. She is here. And she is leading a silent revolution through her being. To honor your rising feminine power, declare it with intention. Comment below, I radiate power, and let your voice encourage others to rise with grace, strength, and quiet revolution. 7. The body's silence is the soul's language. The silence of the body is not a void. It is the hidden doorway to a deeper world within. What many perceive as emptiness is often the first sacred signal that the soul is beginning to stir. When a woman no longer seeks external stimulation when she withdraws, not in defeat, but in instinct, what emerges is not weakness, but the first ripple of her spiritual awakening. She may not even recognize it at first, but the longing, the restlessness, the desire to retreat are signs that her inner self is preparing to rise. In those quiet hours, when the body stops reaching for pleasure or approval, something miraculous happens. The energy that once chased affection is no longer scattered outward. It begins to gather inward. Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Yet here, in this particular kind of silence, there is not just pain, there is clarity. There is expansion. What was once repressed begins to find new form. The energy stored in abstinence, consciously or not, begins to refine itself into perception, creativity, and vision. This is why so many women, after seasons of celibacy or solitude, report more vivid dreams, stronger intuition, or a sudden sense of meaning they cannot explain. It is not coincidence. It is the soul claiming space. And in that space, the woman begins to hear herself again. Her real self is not the version trained to please or perform, but the self that waits in the quiet, whole and untouched. The body's stillness becomes a ritual of remembrance. She sees that she is not missing anything. She is actually returning to everything she lost when she was too noisy, too distracted, too eager to give. Abstinence is not simply the absence of touch. It is the presence of power. When you no longer allow others to constantly access your energy, your clarity sharpens. You start to recognize who drains you, what dims your light, and where you've been giving away pieces of yourself without pause. The woman who once needed affection to feel worthy now becomes the woman who protects her peace like it is gold. This is not resistance. It is rebirth. The truth is, not every desire deserves to be fulfilled. Not every connection is sacred. The body, when left alone long enough, begins to detox from false love and empty attention. You stop craving what once comforted you because it no longer vibrates with your truth. And in that vacuum, you begin to feel a different rhythm, slower, deeper, wiser. You start remembering what it feels like to belong to yourself. Spiritual wisdom teaches us that transformation doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers in the dark, in the places no one else sees. And when the body finally quiets, the soul does not shout. It simply speaks. And if you're brave enough to listen, it will guide you home. If this message has stirred something deep within you, affirm your journey by commenting, "I trust the soul's whispers. My silence is sacred." Your words may inspire another woman to honor her inner voice. And so, when the body falls into silence, it does not signify absence. It invites presence. In that stillness, the soul begins to whisper its deepest truths. As Jung reminded us, the unconscious always finds a way to speak, especially when the distractions fall away. Whether you're on a path of abstinence by choice or by circumstance, remember, this may not be a void. It may be a portal to self-discovery, clarity, and spiritual awakening. If this message stirred something within you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the profound truths we explore in our upcoming videos. Your journey inward is sacred. Walk it with awareness, and you may just meet your soul there. Why you have no motivation left after spiritual awakening. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Have you ever felt like after finally awakening to deeper truths, life suddenly lost its spark? You're not alone. Many seekers experience a strange emptiness after spiritual awakening. a quiet stillness where motivation used to live. But what if this isn't a failure, but a sacred turning point? In today's video from Spiritual Wisdom, we'll explore why your drive may fade after awakening, and how this phase holds the hidden key to a more authentic life. As you listen, ask yourself, have I experienced this silent pause? Drop a comment below to share your journey, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a moment of truth and transformation. 1. The paradox of awakening. Emptiness after revelation. Spiritual awakening doesn't always arrive with a thunderclap of purpose. More often, it slips in quietly, unraveling everything you once believed about who you are and why you exist. You see through illusions, recognize the masks, and realize that much of what once fueled your ambition, approval, praise, identity was constructed. At first, that realization feels like liberation. You feel clean, almost weightless, like stepping out of a burning house into cool night air. But then comes the silence, and the silence, though peaceful, feels disorienting. You're no longer driven by the same desires, but you haven't yet found a new compass. What follows is a strange hollowness, not depression in the traditional sense, but a sacred kind of stillness. The passions that once lit your fire no longer burn. You don't feel the urge to chase, to prove, to perform. It may feel like a lack of motivation, but it's actually the soul shedding its skin. In Jungian terms, the ego has stepped aside, and now the self begins to take shape. But the self does not rush. It moves with timeless precision, inviting you to slow down, listen, and unlearn. This phase is not a breakdown. It is a reorientation. This is the sacred pause. In the language of spiritual wisdom, it is the winter of the soul, a time when nothing blooms on the surface, but deep beneath, something powerful is rooting. Most people fear this silence because it lacks the validation they're used to. The world celebrates progress, productivity, and hustle. But the soul craves stillness, simplicity, and depth. When you awaken, you stop being moved by shallow incentives. The matrix of achievement no longer seduces you. And without that external push, it feels as though you've stalled. But in truth, you're entering the space where authentic motivation is born not from ego, but from essence. This space feels empty because it is waiting for truth, your truth. Not the truth you inherited, or were told, or absorbed unconsciously, but the kind that rises from silence and speaks without words. In this in-between, you are not supposed to act, fix, or chase. You are meant to sit in the discomfort, to feel what arises, and to honor the quiet transformation taking place. There is no map here, only presence. You are not broken for feeling unmotivated. You are awakening to a deeper rhythm. The fire will return, but it won't come from force. It will come from alignment. When your inner world is no longer at war, when your truth is no longer buried beneath conditioning, something sacred stirs. And what awakens then is not a shallow passion, but a calling, a quiet, unwavering pull towards something real, meaningful, and lasting. If this message resonates with you, comment below. I honor the sacred pause. Your stillness is not a setback. It's part of your transformation. Like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom so you never miss a moment of deep truth on your awakening journey. 2. Loss of motivation is a spiritual recalibration. What appears to be laziness, procrastination, or apathy after a spiritual awakening is often something far deeper, an invisible inner shift that Carl Jung would describe as the dismantling of ego-driven desires. The goals that once ignited us, climbing corporate ladders, gaining approval, chasing success, begin to lose their emotional charge. The fire dims not because the soul is dying, but because it is recalibrating. Motivation that once came from external applause now feels hollow. You no longer strive to be seen because something within you has already witnessed the truth of who you are. Carl Jung taught that the process of individuation, the journey of becoming the true self, demands the shedding of false layers. And one of the loudest layers we carry is the voice of the ego, always pushing, proving, performing. When that voice quiets, there is an eerie silence. You stop chasing what no longer fits your spirit. You become disinterested in things you once obsessed over. But this absence of desire is not depression. It is sacred stillness. It is the soul pulling you inward so you can listen. The modern world fears this pause. Society equates worth with productivity, speed, and output. We're programmed to panic when we lose momentum. But spiritual wisdom sees value in the void. Just like winter strips the trees bare to prepare for spring, the soul removes all that is not rooted in truth. In this season of not doing, you are not falling behind. You are returning to your center. This transition can be disorienting. You might feel like you're drifting, lost, or disconnected. But underneath that numbness is a new current, waiting. Carl Jung emphasized that this stage is necessary for true transformation. The ego must dissolve so that the authentic self, the one aligned with your soul's calling, can emerge without interference. During this time, you may find yourself uninterested in old roles or relationships. You may withdraw from social norms that once defined you. The world may label this as apathy or detachment, but Jung would call it individuation. The self is reclaiming its authority. Your soul is no longer interested in performance. It's interested in presence, in meaning, in wholeness. As this inner shift deepens, motivation eventually returns, but not as it once was. This time, it's not fueled by competition, comparison, or fear of missing out. It comes from peace. You move not to escape yourself, but to express yourself. Action becomes an extension of being, not a mask for emptiness. The truth is, when you lose motivation after awakening, it's not because something has gone wrong. It's because something false has fallen away. The emptiness you feel is the clearing of an old script. What remains is the raw, fertile ground from which authentic purpose will rise quietly, gently, and in perfect alignment with your soul. Are you experiencing a shift in motivation that feels confusing or heavy? It might be your soul realigning with a deeper truth. If you're ready to embrace this inner recalibration, comment below. I trust my soul's timing, and let the journey toward true alignment begin. 3. Carl Jung's concept of the liminal space and negrado. Carl Jung called it negrado, the blackening. It's the stage of spiritual awakening, where the old version of you begins to dissolve. The ego, once driven by validation, ambition, and identity, collapses. But the true self, the soul-led essence of who you really are, hasn't yet fully emerged. This in-between phase is quiet, still, and deeply uncomfortable. It feels like something is dying, and it is. But what's dying isn't your life. It's the illusion of control, the illusion of certainty, the illusion of self built on everything outside of you. In this liminal space, motivation disappears. You no longer chase goals the way you used to. The external rewards that once pushed you, success, approval, performance, suddenly feel meaningless. You might think you're lazy or unmotivated, but what's really happening is a sacred shedding. Your energy is being withdrawn from ego-driven pursuits and redirected toward soul alignment. The fire that once burned for validation now goes quiet, not because you're broken, but because your inner compass is recalibrating. Jung warned that society often misdiagnoses this phase. In a world that glorifies constant productivity and visible results, stillness is seen as failure. But the negrado is not dysfunction, it's purification. The alchemists saw it as the necessary first stage before gold could be created. The psyche undergoes a similar process. It must be stripped of its illusions before it can be made whole. At this stage, life may feel dull or hollow. There is no clarity, no rush of inspiration, just a strange, sacred pause. But this pause is not emptiness, it's gestation. Just as a caterpillar melts into formlessness before becoming a butterfly, your soul is preparing for its next form. There is wisdom in the waiting. There is power in the void. The motivation you once knew came from fear, from survival, from needing to prove something. What comes next will be rooted in peace, in alignment, in truth. You're not meant to force your way through this. The negrado invites surrender. Let yourself rest. Let the layers fall. This is the death before rebirth. It's not a sign that you've lost your purpose. It's proof that a deeper purpose is beginning to form. One that doesn't come from the mind, but from your essence. As Jung said, we cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. This is your liberation. When the soul finishes its quiet work, the light will return, but it will be a different kind of light. Not the spotlight of performance, but the quiet glow of knowing. And in that light, you'll move again, not to prove, not to escape, but because something deeper inside you is ready to live, not perform. That is the real beginning. That is spiritual awakening. If this message resonated with your journey through darkness and transformation, leave a like and subscribe to our channel. Tap the notification bell so you won't miss powerful insights like this. And in the comments, type, "I embrace the liminal space," to affirm your courage in becoming who you truly are. 4. Ego doesn't die. It loses its script. After a spiritual awakening, something profound happens within you. The ego, once the narrator of your entire life story, suddenly falls silent. It doesn't die, but it loses its script. The familiar identities, ambitions, and roles it clung to no longer feel true. You don't want what you used to want. You don't chase what you used to chase. This isn't failure or regression. It's transformation. The ego isn't being destroyed. It's being stripped down, rewritten, humbled. And yet, in this in-between space, the true self hasn't fully emerged. That's the tension, like standing in a quiet theater after the curtain has fallen, but before a new act begins. Carl Jung called this space negrado, the black stage of inner alchemy. A period where meaning dissolves, identity fades, and you are no longer driven by egoic fire. You wake up and no longer feel the same pull toward success, praise, or even productivity. You may ask yourself, why do I feel so empty now that I finally understand the truth? This emptiness is not a flaw. It's a sacred pause. Spiritual wisdom teaches that the soul cannot speak over the noise of performance, and so it must first quiet the ego. What feels like a loss of motivation is, in fact, the beginning of alignment. In this sacred stillness, the external world may not understand you. Friends may say you've changed. Society may label it as burnout, depression, or lack of ambition. But inside, something far more intelligent is occurring. The soul is recalibrating. The energy that once surged toward proving your worth is now redirecting inward, toward presence, awareness, and truth. You are learning to act not from a need to be seen, but from a desire to be whole. And yet, this transition is not easy. You are shedding layers of false self while not yet knowing what the new self will be. It can feel like being in freefall with no destination. But spiritual awakening doesn't promise comfort, it promises clarity. And clarity often arrives through the dismantling of illusions, not the fulfillment of desires. It is in this strange terrain that spiritual wisdom becomes your guide, not to show you what to do, but to remind you that it's okay not to know. Slowly, motivation begins to return, but this time it flows from authenticity, not anxiety. You are no longer motivated by comparison, validation, or fear of falling behind. You are moved by inner truth, gentle purpose, and quiet knowing. The ego, now humble and observant, steps aside for the soul to lead. This new energy is not loud or manic. It is calm, focused, and radiant. It doesn't burn you out. It grounds you. If you feel stuck, unmotivated, or lost after awakening, you are not broken. You are in the sacred chrysalis between who you were and who you are becoming. You are learning how to live without the mask. You are allowing truth to replace performance. And though the ego has lost its lines, the soul is composing something far more beautiful, an inner harmony that no longer needs applause to feel real. Have you ever felt like your old identity no longer fits, but your true voice hasn't fully emerged yet? That's the ego in transition. Share your experience in the comments below. What part of your old script have you let go of? And if you're just beginning to step into the unknown, type, "I am ready to hear my true self," to join others on this powerful journey of transformation. 5. Individuation, becoming the real self. After a spiritual awakening, the motivation that once pushed you to strive, hustle, and prove yourself suddenly disappears, not because you're broken, but because you're being rebuilt from the inside out. According to Carl Jung, this is the process of individuation, the deep psychological integration of ego and self. It's not about becoming something better, it's about becoming whole. But that wholeness doesn't arrive wrapped in clarity or energy. In fact, it often arrives cloaked in silence, stillness, and a strange sense of not knowing who you are anymore. You once ran on fuel made of ambition, approval, and the need to be seen. But that fuel no longer works. The identity that once gave you purpose has dissolved. You're not who you were, but you're not yet who you're becoming. This is the liminal space Jung referred to as a psychological twilight, where the old self has crumbled, but the new self hasn't yet taken shape. It's not dysfunction, it's a sacred transition. In this space, doing for the sake of doing loses its meaning. What once energized you, deadlines, recognition, external rewards, now feels irrelevant. Take the story of Sarah, a corporate high performer who lived on caffeine and career goals. After a powerful moment of awakening during a silent retreat, she returned home to find that everything she had once cared about felt empty. She couldn't force herself to care about sales reports or quarterly goals. What she once called drive now felt like noise. Her soul had begun speaking a new language, but her life was still written in the old one. This is the rupture. Carl Jung described a psychic death that makes space for the self to emerge. But it doesn't happen all at once. There's a waiting, a sacred stillness. And in that stillness, many begin to panic, believing they've lost their passion. But what's really gone is the illusion. What's really arriving is something more honest. This new fuel doesn't look like adrenaline. It looks like peace. It moves in silence. It guides rather than pushes. You're not lazy. You're no longer willing to betray your soul for external rewards. You're not unmotivated. You're waiting for a deeper alignment. The energy that will move you now is quieter, but infinitely more powerful. It flows from authenticity, not image. From connection, not performance. And while the world may not recognize this transformation, your inner being does. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." This awakening dismantles everything false, but in doing so, it opens the door to everything real. You're not meant to go back. You're meant to go deeper. The silence you're experiencing isn't the end. It's the invitation. If this message resonated with your soul, leave a comment of intention. I choose to live from my authentic self. And if you're ready to walk this path of inner wholeness, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of spiritual wisdom. 6. Modern culture fears the sacred pause. Society misunderstands stillness. It labels it laziness, depression, or weakness because it fears what it cannot control. In a culture that idolizes constant movement and measurable success, doing nothing looks suspicious. But after a spiritual awakening, that nothing is sacred. It's not dysfunction, it's divine timing. The soul does not move at the speed of capitalism. It doesn't wake up and immediately demand a to-do list. It whispers. It waits. And in that silence, something ancient begins to stir. Carl Jung understood this. He saw the human journey not as a race to productivity, but as a spiral inward, a return to the self. He warned that true transformation doesn't happen in motion, but in stillness. Jung called this withdrawal of energy the beginning of individuation. It's when the ego steps back and the deeper self prepares to emerge. But before that emergence, there is often a long pause, a psychological winter where nothing blooms and the old motivations fall away like dead leaves. This is the sacred recalibration. You are not lazy. You are detoxing from the noise of the world. The goals that once fired you up were often rooted in ego, fear, or a desire to prove your worth. Now that you've seen through the illusion, those goals no longer energize you. That's not failure. That's progress. You are learning to live from the soul instead of survival. What once pushed you approval, validation, competition, no longer matters. That's why your motivation fades. It's not gone. It's being rewritten. But this part is painful. Because no one warns you that spiritual awakening feels like emptiness before it feels like purpose. You're no longer chasing, but you haven't yet received the new direction. You're in between stories. The old script has burned, and the new voice hasn't spoken yet. This is the liminal space, and it can feel unbearable. But it is also the birthplace of authenticity. As Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. That can only happen in silence. So if you feel hollow, uninspired, or still, Know this: you are not broken. You are becoming real. You are pausing not because you have failed, but because your inner life is asking to be heard. The soul does not shout, it whispers. And to hear it, you must be still. The discomfort you feel is not the absence of progress, it is the death of performance. You are shedding the need to be seen, liked, or praised, and beginning the slow, sacred work of being whole. This is the wisdom that spiritual awakening brings, not excitement or clarity, but the courage to sit in the dark and wait for your real self to rise. Do you feel the truth of this message in your soul? If so, declare it in the comments below. I honor the sacred pause within me. And if this video spoke to your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a moment of stillness and truth. 7. Shadow work, the foundation of real growth. After a spiritual awakening, what many expect is a flood of energy, purpose, and newfound clarity. But what actually arrives is often a deep, uncomfortable stillness, a quiet emptiness. And in that silence, the first real work begins, not the work of achieving, but the work of becoming. What feels like a loss of motivation is not a failure of progress, it's a shift in direction. You are no longer driven by egoic goals, by the need to prove or perform. What once lit your fire approval, success, and identity suddenly feels hollow. This isn't stagnation, it's space. And space is what the shadow has been waiting for. The shadow holds everything you've hidden from yourself. Your grief, your rage, your loneliness, your unmet needs. These pieces don't rise to punish you. They rise to be seen, integrated, and loved. They are not signs that you are regressing. They are signs that you are finally strong enough to meet them. In spiritual wisdom, this is not a setback. It's a sacred return. You are circling back to the beginning, but from a higher place. You are not the same person re-entering the same pain. You are the one who now has the capacity to hold it, honor it, and transform it. Many people think shadow work is advanced, that it comes after the light, after the awakening, after the bliss. But this is a misunderstanding. Shadow work is not the final level. It's the foundation. Without it, your awakening remains incomplete. As Carl Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. To evolve, you must stop bypassing the dark and start honoring it. The shadow is not your enemy. It is the doorway to your wholeness. When the old motivations dissolve, it means the old self is dying. You are no longer performing for validation. You are no longer chasing meaning through external accomplishments. Instead, you're invited to find meaning within. This can feel disorienting, like being between worlds. The ego has lost its script, but the true self hasn't yet spoken. You are in the in-between, the psychological negrado, where everything breaks down to make space for something new to be born. And that space, that's where the soul begins to speak. Shadow work is like renovating the soul's architecture. At first, everything gets messier. Dust, debris, destruction. But beneath the chaos is the outline of something real, your truest self. This is where you meet your inner child, where you welcome home the parts of you that were silenced to survive. It's not glamorous. It's not Instagram worthy, but it is sacred. Because the deeper you go into your own pain, the more power you reclaim. You stop waiting to be rescued. You start becoming the one you were always searching for. So when the fire dims, when your passion disappears, When nothing makes sense anymore, that is not the end. That is the invitation. Spiritual wisdom is not found in always feeling high. It's found in learning how to walk through the dark with presence. You are not falling behind. You are falling inward, into yourself, into truth. And that is the most important step on the path of becoming whole. If you're ready to face your shadow and grow from within, don't hesitate to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let's walk this path of real healing together. 8. Emergence of soul-led motivation. Eventually, the old fuel dries up. You no longer feel pushed by anxiety, fear, or the need to prove yourself. What once drove you chasing achievements, pleasing others, striving to be seen, now feels hollow. This isn't a sign that you're lazy or lost. It's the soul reclaiming the wheel. You're entering a different kind of rhythm, one that doesn't shout, but hums quietly with truth. Carl Jung called this the symbolic life, a life where actions come not from ego, but from meaning. At first, it can feel strange. Motivation doesn't disappear. It changes shape. Instead of waking up with a checklist and a sense of pressure, you begin to wake up with questions that matter. What feels aligned today? What would bring me peace, not just productivity? You start doing things not to be impressive, but to be expressive. Not to climb higher, but to live deeper. Your energy is no longer a performance. It becomes a presence. In a world obsessed with hustle, this new rhythm can feel like rebellion. Let's say you've worked a stable job for years, followed the rules, met expectations. But one day, you sit in front of your computer and feel a quiet ache. It's not exhaustion, it's disconnection. That moment isn't failure, it's a sacred turning point. The soul is whispering, there's more. And it's not out there, it's in here. That's when something begins to shift. You begin to make space for simplicity. You begin to listen to the subtle language of your heart. This new form of motivation is slower but deeper. It's not about the finish line. It's about the integrity of the step you're taking right now. You may still work hard, but the energy behind it is different. It's no longer fueled by fear of not being enough. It's led by the joy of being real. Carl Jung reminded us, who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. That awakening doesn't always bring fireworks. Sometimes it brings silence. But in that silence, there's power still, soft and steady. You begin to see that motivation isn't about force, it's about flow. The soul doesn't shout, it nudges. It moves in rhythms, not deadlines. It chooses depth over display. And when you follow it, even the smallest act becomes sacred. Writing, walking, cooking, resting, it all becomes a form of alignment. The world might not understand this shift, but you do. Because once you've tasted the truth of soul-led living, there's no going back to noise. There's only forward into the quiet fire of your becoming. 9. From performance to presence, living as the self. You no longer chase clarity, applause, or a polished sense of identity. The need to define yourself, to prove your worth through achievements or recognition, slowly dissolves. It doesn't feel like giving up. It feels like waking up. Something within you becomes still, yet profoundly alive. You start responding to life from the inside out, not reacting to every external demand. Your guidance now flows from dreams, symbols, gut feelings, and that unshakable inner peace that doesn't need to explain itself to the world. The self begins to rise, not the version of you, crafted through performance or praise, but the quiet, enduring presence that's always been underneath. You stop craving the fire that once burned to be seen or understood. Instead, a new flame is born. It's not fierce like the old one. It doesn't roar. It glows. It's steady, unbothered, and rooted in something far more eternal than ambition. That flame is your essence, and it doesn't come from striving. It comes from surrendering. As you enter this deeper phase of spiritual awakening, life feels different. Slower, perhaps. Simpler. You begin to see beauty in the pause, not just the progress. You no longer feel pulled to force things or control outcomes. The world may call it stillness. You know it as alignment. Where others see boredom, you feel clarity. Where others see disinterest, you're experiencing divine presence. You're no longer chasing signs, you've become one. You're not seeking meaning in chaos. You're radiating meaning through your calm. Carl Jung said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." And now you do. You don't need to perform, to entertain, or to conform. You don't need to fit in because you were never meant to blend. You were meant to become, to embody, to walk with truth even if no one notices, even if no one claps. You live not from fear of missing out, but from the fullness of being here. This is not the end of your fire. It's the birth of a new one, a quiet one, a flame that lights others not with spectacle, but with presence. You are not empty. You are spacious. You are not lost. You are free. This is the sacred aftermath of awakening, not the rush of purpose, but the grace of presence. Not the noise of the world, but the stillness of the soul, fully alive in its own truth. To affirm your commitment to living from presence, not performance, declare it boldly. Comment below. I live from my true self, to honor your inner journey and inspire others to rise from within. And if this message resonates, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone on the path. If this message resonated with you, know that you are not alone. The emptiness after awakening is not the end. It's the beginning of something deeper. Let it guide you inward, where the true purpose is quietly waiting. If you found value in this reflection, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more soul-nourishing content like this. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next video. Your journey matters, and we're honored to walk it with you.